Hi, this is Janos, Real World Audio, and again, time for a short answer, keeping the video more compact. And I'm answering Jürgen's comment because he is building, actually, he commented that he has already built his LePetit cabinet, and he has shared his initial experiences with it, and I'm going to share that. And that's what he said. Janos, thank you for your encouragement. Your input is so helpful and educational. Since it took me 2 days to veneer the extra front baffle, I now regret not finding your channel earlier. I did finish the cabinet build already some time ago, including the ugly reflex vents. And he says that because I gave a suggestion last night that to change the reflex vent to a slot board. That's one thing that can elevate the cabinet. And also I gave him a suggestion to, instead of putting the extra front baffle in the front, to recess the new driver, the new Fostex driver, and that will make it more suitable for this cabinet, because it has a different behavior in the 2 kilohertz range compared to the original driver that John Hiraga designed that cabinet for. So it needs minor adjustment to handle it well. Well, maybe I just try to put the driver as it is, and I already rounded the speaker hole in the baffle on the inside. But generally speaking, I tried the Petit just yesterday for the first time and was shocked about the much too harsh and bright sound. But Torsten was kindly telling me, Torsten is Snake Oil Audio, and he did initially a really nice overview on LePetit, and and actually he gave me the idea to look more into LePetit and and give my thoughts to help all of you to, when you do your build, to just give you as many tools and possibilities and ideas as you can to get the most out of it. So this is kind of like a helping hand for those of you who got the idea and inspiration to build this unique speaker. And uh, and so, coming back to Jürgen's comment, so Torsten was kindly telling me you cannot just try new drivers out of the box; they need to run in, and uh, and I can second that. So in general, when we try out new, when we build a speaker for ourselves, we put in our drivers, the sound that we hear right away will be very different from how it will sound when it's fully broken in. And what I can say, because Jürgen is using Fostex drivers, that my experience with Fostex drivers is that they take a long time to run in, to burn in, and until then they have a harsh and bright sound. So that's exactly the same as Jürgen reported, harsh and bright sound. And that's because their upper bass and mid bass and low bass, it needs a lot of time to come up, to start appearing. What I noticed is that the compliance of the surround is too harsh in the beginning, and when the driver breaks in, the surround is breaking in. So in the beginning, that harsh surround is not letting the driver to produce low frequency sounds. That's why it sounds harsh and bright, because you are, most of what you are getting is just from upper mid-range to high frequency on, and there's very little bass, and that's why you want to crank up the volume to start hearing the bass. But then the highs and upper mids are way too loud and way too bright. And so what I noticed is that Fostex usually takes about 200 hours for the bass to start breaking in. And Jürgen, what you could do to facilitate this breaking process is to play music that has a lot of bass in it and relatively not as much high frequencies and upper mids. So like, just put something that's a lot of bass, maybe like double bass or cello, something like that. and that will really speed up the braking process. But once the compliance has fully broken in, then those missing, so where does he say? I think here that is. But I still fear my dampening felt glued onto the inside wall is too hard and swallows the mid and upper bass. I think the felt dampening that would swallow more like the mid range, medium. It depends on what material your cabinet is. I'm not sure if you built it from MDF or plywood, because if it's like high quality plywood, then the felt would absorb uh, essentially like the lower mid range, and also I would say upper bass as well, and some of the mid bass as well. The cabinet size is such that it just maybe barely reaches the mid bass, but it's certainly like it would add more upper bass to the sound, but it would also add more uh, lower mid range as well. So if you take out the dampening, then in the mid range you will get much more. And however, I think that the upper bass and mid bass now they are lacking because the compliance needs to loosen up. The driver needs to break in. So the adventure continues. So I think Jürgen just keep on at it, and it will be much more opening up. And there's one more thing, that even if you are, let's say, around 400-500 hours, and then what you notice is that you are happy with the mid-range and upper frequencies, but you still feel that the upper bass will be there. That's my prediction. But the mid bass might be still a little bit lacking. Then the fix for that is the internal cabling. The secret to have really good low end for single driver speakers is the internal wiring. You need uh, really heavy gauge internal wiring to get serious bass for single drivers, and I'm recommending like a total gauge of at least 12 gauge 12 for the wires that are internally connecting your drivers. And also in this case, those internal wires are going to take an eternity to break in, because it you are just using like a watt or 2 watts at most to drive these tiny babies. They are not high current drivers. So when you have a monster loudspeaker and you are dumping like 100 watts at it, then if you have this heavy gauge internal wiring, it will break in relatively fast. But with a single driver, if you put in this heavy gauge internal cabling, it's going to take you maybe like 500 hours to break in. So that's another component why a single driver speaker freshly built, especially with such a tiny cone, will initially have almost no bass whatsoever. One, compliance. Two is the internal cabling. And if the internal cabling is like gauge 16, 18, or 20, then it will break in sooner, but you won't really have the lower parts of the mid bass. It will just keep at the higher frequencies, but you will need, that's what I recommend, at least go for gauge 12, or you can even go for gauge 10 or gauge 8, which is ridiculously low, but it will give you a lot more deep end to a level that you will never think about adding a subwoofer, because you will have the quality of that low end extension that you want to look for, but it will take maybe like 1,000 hours to break in. And that's what Thiago experienced recently. He emailed me that if some of you might remember that I had a video or two about the Dyne Audio speaker tuning, which is a small bookshelf speaker, and it's all the two-way speaker, so it's not a single driver speaker, but it's two-way, but also a tiny cabinet. And I recommended him for the build, like a much heavier gauge internal wiring, and also crossover parts which are much heavier gauge than the original ones. And he just recently reported to me that the bass just started to appear, and until recently, for many hundreds of hours, he did not have the low end extension that he had before the mods. And he said now the extension, now it came back so much after he has done the mods. And that's because the heavier gauge something is, the longer it takes to break in, but once it's broken in, you will have tremendous benefits from it. So thank you, Jürgen, for sharing, and I wish you continue the excellent adventures. And short video today. Please like, subscribe. Bye bye.